Managers live on Facebook.
Okay, great. So there we go. So nice to see you all. Nice to see some familiar faces that we already saw before. So that's very nice to see you back, guys. Welcome to everyone. So I'm Alexi. I'm a product manager at Product People. I joined some month ago. Really happy here to welcome Deepak tonight. So at Product People, we are helping companies to build better product and faster. For that, we have a range of offers. We can act as interim product managers in like our team, like be part of the team, or we have also some more consultancy approach when we deliver some work on daily basis to other companies on a more like strategy level. But we're also a community builder, so that's why we host these events, such as the one tonight. If you like these events, please don't hesitate to support us on Patreon. Even if it's not much, every little bit adds up, and it's always helpful. And also don't hesitate to reach us on our Telegram chat. We're always talking about some product stuff. There's always something going on there, so don't hesitate to join. So tonight we're super proud and really happy to welcome Deepak from Zalando, and he's going to talk about some pragmatic management. So we are curious to know what it is. So I will let you the screen, Deepak, and have a good talk, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And I'll assume that you can see my screen.
Yep.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so let's get started. First of all, thanks everybody for joining in. And I hope that this will be good use of your time today. The topic I chose today is, and after a lot of deliberation as to what I should call it, is pragmatic product management. And we will dig in a bit as to what that is, right? But first, maybe I thought I could give a quick round of introduction about myself. So I've been in the technology industry now for 15 years, spent 10 years in product management. I love building products. Been doing that actually for a very long time, even before I started working all the way from my school days. So I kind of love building products in general. Worked in all sorts of environments, as you can probably see, really large organizations like IBM and Microsoft and Cisco, right, where I kind of grew up in those organizations, but also fast-growing startups like Mobi and Zalando, where I work currently, right, and also smaller startup companies like Realytics, where I spent some part of my time here at Berlin. At Zalando, I'm the principal product manager. I work with a specific unit called ZMS, Zalando Marketing Services, right? And I also volunteer outside of work with this organization called Head Start. So I am actually quite passionate about building companies too. I was fortunate to be involved with building one of these companies called Yipidu back in 2015. Which with a group of friends of mine, and we kind of exited that. So actually, we built it in 2012 and exited in 2015. Right. So as you can kind of see, maybe I have had the opportunity of building products in all sorts of environments, and I am also quite passionate about entrepreneurship, and that is what you will kind of see as a theme as well, right, through this talk today. Before we get started, I just want to kind of let you know that I will be asking you some questions, right, just for your feedbacks, and it'll be great to have your inputs through the chat interface on Zoom. So I'll let you know when you need to do that. All right, let's get the biggest elephant out of the room. What is pragmatic? Why is this called pragmatic product management, right? And I thought I could start by just putting up the dictionary meaning of what pragmatic means. Maybe all of you know this, but I still thought it might be useful. Is it's essentially solving problems in a sensible way, right? Based on the conditions that exist now, right? Rather than really fixating about ideas and theories and rules, right? And that's what I want to talk about. And I hope this content will be helpful, as I said. But in my experience, I think this is going to be very helpful in a 0 to 1 story, right? So that is, if you are creating new product, this will be definitely very helpful. It will be helpful in other scenarios as well. But I think in a 0 to 1 story, this is definitely going to be of help. All right, let's quickly look at frameworks. I initially thought I'll do a word cloud, and then I kind of gave up. But I think you get the sense. There are lots of frameworks right out there, and methodologies out there around product management, around building product, and they do a good job, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not kind of saying anything bad about the frameworks. They're there for a reason, right? But we will walk today through some of these some of these frameworks as to whether they are helpful or not, and when, and you have Lean Canvas, and you have Press Release, right, which has been adopted by Amazon and Zalando and so many other consumer-facing companies. When you look at prioritizations, there are just so many frameworks around, how do you do, prioritization, value versus complexity by feature, even to the extent of, measuring success. You have the OKR framework, you have the HEART framework, which has been championed by Google of late, right? I just want you to keep this in mind, that remember that these, the practices came first, and then the frameworks came next, right? And in many cases, the frameworks came in to structure these practices so others can benefit from it, right? So therefore, they have a meaning in life. We will, however, today focus on some of the practices which may or may not exist in a framework. Most likely, they belong to the art and science of product management category. Yeah. Now, before we begin looking at any kind of pragmatism, I wanted to establish some table stakes, right? And these table stakes are essentially the fundamentals on which we build the rest of the session, right? And the very first table stake is the product, right? And because we are in the business of product management, so the question is, what is a product, right? And it'll be great if you guys can actually, now, give your responses on the chat. Maybe we'll take 45 seconds, 30 to 45 seconds, and I'd love to kind of, have your inputs. And let me bring up the chat window here for me to look at. Something to solve a customer's need, sure, yes. Something I can sell that delivers a value, sure, yes. Anything someone can interact with to perform an action, right, Malik, yes, okay. Opportunity, door opener, okay, sure, yes.
To our guests from Facebook or YouTube, if you want to also participate, please post the questions and we can transfer them.
Sure. Great. And I see a response from Gulshan, something that is a result of an action. Sure. So let's anything that serves a goal. Great. That's great inputs, right? Anything that serves a goal. This point, let's kind of move ahead and see what is a product, right? And in a more common context, right, a product is a technical solution, right? Or it is often perceived as a technical solution to a problem, things that you can kind of directly interact with, things that a lot of us feel we control as to what it should be and how people should interact and how these systems should behave, so have hard boundaries. Right, and yes, in many scenarios this is absolutely true, but in reality, your product is far more than the technical solution, right? In fact, in reality, all of this is really your product, right? And if you look at what your customer is, and at this point you kind of take the customer's viewpoint, right? There is the technical solution your customers are interacting with. There is a user experience in particular that your customers are kind of navigating through. And experience is not just navigation, right? It is also the whole experience, the journey, as they kind of say, right? How are you enabling the whole journey? There is product documentation. Many people would argue that, what, product experience also encompasses product documentation. Sure, in some cases, yes. But there is customer service. If you're in an e-commerce world, there is logistics and delivery. If you're in the DevOps world, there is API. But there are so many surfaces through which your customers are going to interact with you. And really all of this is your product, right? And this is very important to internalize, that your product is not just the technical solution you're building, but really everything that your customer interfaces with, be it a human or a machine, right? Let's move to the next table stakes, right? By the way, I'm not looking at chat windows. So if there are any questions, I will not be able to look at them now, but we'll come back to that towards the end of the session. Let's look at table stakes number 2, right? The customer. Again, we're in the business of building product, and this is oft quoted topic that it's at the heart is the customer. Sure, start with the customer. Sure, yeah, we should start with the customer, but how? And I wanted to bring up these views from 2 great founders who have built really successful companies over the years, Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos. I don't even have to say which companies, I'm sure you know. I'm projecting the screen from one of them, right? And if you look at what Jobs had said, and this is again being known out there, is I would not ask a customer what they want, because how can they tell me what they want when what I'm trying to build has not even been invented yet, right? And within his quote, he subsumes a quote from Henry Ford, done much earlier, saying that if I asked a customer what they want, they would have told me a faster horse, right? And then on the other hand, you have Jeff Bezos, who's arguably built the one of the most customer-centric companies in the world, and of course he's a massive champion for staying laser focused on the customer and being everything customer backwards, right? As they're the ones who are paying for his services, right? Nobody else. So at this point, I will ask you guys to give me another set of responses on the chat, of course, on which one do you side with, right? Which do you think you agree with, right? And you're free to answer anything that comes to mind, Jobs or Bezos. And you can, we'll take 30, 40 seconds to go through those responses. So you can just type either Jobs or Bezos. Both? Okay, sure. Jobs is correct, I believe. All right. So either others are not able to pick a side and are really torn between the two, right? Or Jobs, although I believe Ford didn't say that, Kaya. We will address this point in the next slide, Kaya. But sure, both? Right. Okay, depends on the business line. Sure, both, but I will go with Bezos. Right, both, they are mutually exclusive. Malik, that's a good response. Okay, let's go back to the slide. Yeah, and you can't really follow both at the same time. That's right. You can't follow both at the same time because they're trying to probably achieve different things. You could, however, follow Jobs' approach in one type of product. I'm sorry, is there somebody trying to say something? Okay. You could, however, follow Jobs' approach in one type of product and Bezos' approach in an entirely different type of product. So both kind of could be relevant, maybe, right? But do keep this in mind, right? There are many critics of Jobs' approach as well, and especially those who would side with Bezos, maybe, right? That for every iPhone that you see, there is a Google Glass out there, right? Like, who asked for that? Maybe great technology, we just don't know that yet, right? Because we didn't know what we want there, right? I came across this article, and Kaya, this goes back to your comment. Maybe I don't believe Ford made that call, made that quote. Sure, maybe. I'm not a judge to say whether he did or he did not. I honestly did not dig in that deep. However, there are, of course, many views say maybe that quote was misinterpreted, or maybe that quote was never given by Ford, but by somebody else, or maybe Ford did give that quote, but he was just plain wrong. Right. Either ways, I think that is not what's important here. If you just take the quote at the face value and try to kind of just analyze that, probably what the customer would have told, if a customer ever said that to Ford, would, not really, he would have probably told him that, that they want a faster mode of transportation. They probably could not articulate the form factor, right? But they could probably, all customers understand the problems that they have, the motivations that they have, right? They may not necessarily have the articulation to put that across. Sometimes, the real motivations are many layers underneath that, right? Underneath the problem that's really being stated, right? So in the end, it's all about the customer, one way or the other, however you look at that, right? And understanding their motivations and their challenges and their aspiration. I mean, that's truly the key, right? And even before their problems, try to know the customer. There's one practice I found pretty interesting and pretty helpful over the years. There's a training I took many years ago back during my days at Microsoft, and it's called Precision Question and Answers, and it's publicly available training, I believe. And you could look it up. And this is a very interesting technique to kind of get to the root of whatever you are investigating, right? Oftentimes, as we kind of just looked at examples, the customers may not be able to articulate their responses to a meta level question as to hey, what do you want? But with enough nudges, you can probably get down to their new motivation. Yeah. And this actually reminds me, this ability to get down to what the customer really wants and to really know your customer, right? There's this famous quote from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, right, around greatness. Right, and this kind of some are born great. So when it comes to knowing your customers, right, it is no easy task. And maybe in this regard, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them, right? So you over time, probably a lot of us will lie in that last category, where over time we are trying to get great at knowing our customers, right? It's very important to iterate over your understanding of the customer, right? But do not abandon that journey, right? You could be wrong, maybe the first instance, but keep digging on to get to the true motivation of the customer, and that will open up the doors for a lot of things, right? To recap, we've looked at two table stakes, right? We've looked at what is a product, or what should be the product. Again, no standard definition to say that everything I showed you on the slide is a product, but your product is definitely larger and bigger than just the technical solution. And the customer is at the center of everything. And that's very important to know your customer, right? The motivations, the aspirations, right? Very important. That then kind of becomes the stage on top of which you could look at things more pragmatically. You could start making trade-offs, that don't kind of tie you up on one framework over the other, right? And I believe that when you start thinking like an entrepreneur, you automatically think pragmatic, right? Because imagine that you are running your own company. What's most important to you is that you solve the problem. Sure, it could be misinterpreted if I say that, it doesn't matter how, but maybe it does matter. But I think what's important is the means are important, but far more important than the means are the end. So you've got to get to the end, right? So if you're struggling for your next month's billing, you've got to make sure that happens. You keep making progress, right? I think this is one quote I read in a Nautiyal article once, that the ability to take everyday experiences and deconstruct them and put them forward in a better way, right, is another hallmark of an entrepreneur, and inspired product managers, right? So I think when you look at the rest of the slide, kind of think entrepreneurial, think 0 to 1, and maybe some of them will start making a lot more sense to you, right? Now, the first thing is around being pragmatic. Kind of means simplify, right, and don't complicate, right? And what does this mean? There are two kinds of decision. Again, I'm kind of borrowing from, Amazon and Jeff Bezos' story. And you'll see many Amazon executives quoted on this, right? There are two kinds of decision, and this has now kind of become very, very famous. There's two kinds of decisions, right, that you could come across. one-way doors and two-way doors, right? And one-way doors are irreversible decisions, and you should carefully weigh the options in front of you. They should be made methodically and carefully, right? Give them enough time. Sometimes you got to think through, let them simmer in terms of the data you're getting in, and then kind of get enough data, right? Maybe to make a decision. But there are two-way doors as well, which are reversible decisions, and they aren't so much like the one-way door decisions. You can kind of walk in the door, and then if you don't like what you see on their side, like walk out of that door, right? In those cases, even if you make suboptimal decisions, you don't have to necessarily live with the consequence for that long. Now, it's very hard. This is one of the hardest thing to do as to which one is one way and which one is two way, right? Now, for some businesses, maybe one set of decisions could be one way doors, and for other it could be other set of decisions which are one way door, right? But one of the things that I kind of find very helpful is no matter what, you think minimal, right? And anytime you're kind of trying to solve a problem, right, think minimal, and in really, really thin slices, as thin as you can get in that slice. And I think that's a very good approach either ways. But it's very, very crucial, especially for one-way doors, because in the one-way door, you want to minimize the risk. So build, test, iterate, right? And I can't stress enough how important that cycle is: build, test, iterate, right? That's if you were to say which framework kind of works, I don't know what framework this is, but build, test, and iterate, right? And I'm sure that it's not that I don't know which framework it's going to say, hey, this is agile. Sure, right? Give it the name you want, right? But just make sure that you're building fast enough, putting it out in front of customers, testing it, quickly iterating over it, right? And I can probably give you a quick example from one of my experiences where we were trying to do a feature where we were giving some kind of analytics out for our customers, and we had to kind of give them, hey, here are the bunch of products, right, and here is how they performed, right? And in the beginning, they had nothing. The customer said, hey, can you kind of give me something around this, right? They said very, very quickly, without waiting for a million customers to kind of tell me. We checked with a few customers, and then we came up with a quick insight that was actually quite, well, for the lack of a better word, not necessarily the most beautiful looking insight that you would see, but it did its job. It showed you the product. It did showed you the insights that you wanted to see against that, and all kind of coming automatically into the system, right? And then literally every week we iterated over that, right? So in the first report was a long list of products, even if they had zero performance against that, right? And then we cut it down, said, okay, no, let's only do the ones which are, which have performance against them, and then paginate that, and then add the images next to that next cycle, and then add the country breakdown in the next cycle. So the idea is that you got to kind of, these are decisions which are also reversible. I don't have to think too hard in some of these decisions, right? And even if some of them were one way, when I'm thin slicing it, I have the opportunity of minimizing my risk. So simplify, don't complicate. This is the one that I kind of, I think sometimes people struggle with a lot, and including me many times, right? Is that it's the people who make products, right? And it's the people who use the product, right? And I think we talked about people using the product a little while ago. But the one that I'll probably stress here is that people who make the product are really, really important, right? And technology is just an enabler, right? At the center, it's the people, not the technology, right? And there is this, again, something called as Conway's law. I think Melvin Colvin, if don't hold that against me, I don't remember his first name. But there's this famous law where he kind of said that a software system or a product usually resembles the communication structure in an organization, right? And oftentimes you will see these examples where you see a product that sometimes may look like a hodgepodge of features and doesn't necessarily blend together. And you can safely assume that that's reflecting the communication structure in that organization, right? It's how people talk. And sometimes there are organizations which are kind of sitting right next to each other and talking a lot, right? And they build a product in one way, and then there are organizations that are spread across the world, may not necessarily have the best communication structure and build another way. Now, I'm not saying that if you're sitting right next to each other, you build great products, and if you're sitting far from each other, you don't build great products. That's not what I'm saying, right? What I'm trying to say is that having purpose and trust, right, between various streams which are contributing to your product is critical. And this spans beyond just the engineering teams. It spans all the way into your business development teams, into your sales teams, into your services team, right? And in fact, some of the most important people, right, and as you build the product, are going to be the frontline sellers, frontline customer service executives, right? And they are really going to make sure your product succeeds. Right, and of course customers, right, when you're thinking of transcending the communication boundaries that exist in your organization, don't forget the customer, right? At the end, when you build strong communication channels with your customers, they are really going to be the biggest contributor to your roadmap, right? So remember that building product is not about creating roadmaps and filling up the backlogs. Backlogs and roadmaps are means to an end. And don't get too worked up on the best methodology to create a roadmap. Make sure that you're talking to people, you have communication, you have seamless communication happening across all your teams. They're bound by a common purpose, they trust each other, and then magic happens. Let's move to the second leg and second half of this. And this is one of my favorite, product intuition versus data. There is a very famous motto, right? In data we trust, right? And almost all product managers and anybody building product these days kind of has heard of it and kind of probably lives by it. And this is a take on the official US motto, which says, "In God we trust," right? And I like to I really like that analogy because it's a literal take from that motto, right? That much like that in God we trust, the belief in data is polytheism, right? So really the question becomes, in data we trust, yeah, sure, but which data do you believe in more, right? There is so much of data, right, and that you can actually measure a lot, right? And the question is that, okay, which one is more valuable, right? And which one will you measure, and which one will you really take your product calls on? Right. So don't get caught in analysis paralysis, right? Measure what is truly valuable and take decisions, move on, go back to that, the fact that some are one-way doors, some are two-way doors, right? And iterate and build and iterate, right? And over time, you will build your product intuition, right? And that kind of happens with practice, that kind of happens with experience. Product intuition, though, is different than opinions, right? Opinions are your opinions and your teammates' opinions, right? But intuition is not entirely dissociated from data, right? Intuition is in many ways driven by data, but it's just that you don't necessarily wait for like 100% or 120% of data to be available, right? You use data to back your intuition sometimes, not in all situations, but sometimes, and then you move forward, right? In two-way doors, sometimes this is going to be helpful when you can move fast and again iterate. Right? When I was actually reading about this, and I have practiced this for some time, but as I was preparing for this call, I was trying to say, hey, let me see, is it something that people can actually build? And I came across a bunch of great articles. There's one that I came across from this lady called Mercy Victoria Grace, who's an ex-director product at Slack, and she has this great article on how to train your product intuition. And there are so many others out there, right, which are around how you can actually train your product intuition. So I find this quite intriguing, this whole product intuition versus data. And I think this is quite helpful when you're taking pragmatic decisions, right? The last one I want to touch in terms of pragmatism is, and this is more like a word of caution than anything else, is that being pragmatic does not mean short-term views, right? And it doesn't mean that, let me take a decisions right now and just be done with it. I'll see what happens next. It's a two-way door, right? And if you just take too many short-term decisions, right, you end up in a mess, right? So I want to caution that being pragmatic does not mean that you are being short-term, right? So don't underestimate the power of patience, right? You still need to have your long-term views in place. What is it that you're truly trying to achieve? And this goes back and connects to what's your product and who's your customer. Never forget that, right? That always, those are literally the two things on top of which you're taking many of these decisions and many of these trade-offs, right? And many of these trade-offs are your everyday trade-offs, right? So but still do not underestimate the power of patience, right? And oftentimes we kind of live in times where it's the era of quarterly roadmaps, right? And everything is quarter by quarter, and you can have feature plans which are quarterly. That's perfectly fine, but don't mistake your features to be your product. Features are part of the product. Your features are not the products by themselves, right? Really good products were built over many years, and you can take many examples, and you can see many around you. Xbox comes to mind, right? That for many years it wasn't necessarily the most successful product in the very early days of Xbox, and then Xbox 360 came, and it really turned it around, right? And this is one thing that I really loved about Microsoft is tenacity, right? You stay on, and if you really believe in the product you're building, you your customers well, then patience goes a long way in really creating world-class products. Again, fine balance between being optimistic and over optimistic, so keep that in mind, right? But just the key point from this slide is that being pragmatic doesn't mean that you're short term. Now, this is all of the main content, and I wanted to kind of maybe end with this slight detour, right? And because this is also something that's often quoted, and I'll talk about it, but I will read this slide maybe little quickly, but if you can read faster than me, please go ahead, right? I wanted to bring up this example of who the conductor of an orchestra, right? And maybe let's start at the beginning. At a basic level, conducting is very simple. It keeps an orchestra or a choir in time and together. And this, by the way, is thanks to classicfm.com, right? So it's not written by me. I came across this article, but that's just the starting point, right? Most importantly, a conductor serves as a messenger for the composer. It is their responsibility, the conductor's responsibility, to understand the music and convey it through gestures so transparently that the musician in orchestra understands it perfectly. Those musicians can then transmit a unified vision of the music out to the audience. Rings a bell, right? And this is something that we hear often. Is product manager is a CEO? I mean, is truly a product manager CEO of a product? Maybe, right? Again, each one to themselves, right? Maybe some people like to believe they're a CEO, and sure, in some cases you try to act as one. But what I like to believe is that a product manager is really the conductor of an orchestra, right? And I find that analogy a lot more inspiring for me than the other analogy. And now let me kind of just wrap it up, because I'm also looking at the time that I have with you guys, and just to kind of wrap up here, we looked at framework at the first slide, and we looked at some table stakes, and then we kind of looked at some situations, some mechanisms through which kind of which allow you to be pragmatic and how. But I want to say that all frameworks are still great, right? And we talked about it earlier as well. They all have place in our lives, right? But you kind of need to have your product vision and customer sorted. And that is what will help you kind of, don't get overly fixated on methodologies, right? I think in the end, I'll just say that, at some level, pragmatism is about taking decisions to keep moving forward with what you have and what you know, right? So know your assumptions and know your risks, right? Keeping in mind your long-term goal, right? And with that, I'll probably leave you with very quick recommendations. I didn't want to go overboard with this, but these are some kind of reading material or listening material that I have found helpful of late. There's this book by called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, who's a co-founder of Zappos, and he talks a lot about how customer service is super critical, right, to building your product, and the product is more than the technical solution. This gentleman, whom I do not know personally, called Shreyas Doshi, he has a Twitter handle called @Shreyas, and I have over the years, at least over the last few quarters, definitely loved reading some of the things he puts out there. Again, there are so many more influencers. You can find some of your own, maybe you look up, one, and, Twitter comes up with the, recommendations through its algorithms, right? And this is one podcast that over the years, at least for a couple of years, I've heard now on, Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman, who's a co-founder of LinkedIn. And I have loved, I have loved listening to Masters of Scale. It's an amazing sort of podcast on how to build scale 0 to 1 stories, 1 to 100 stories, pragmatic takes all through to build the product that you want to build, right? So with that, I think I'm also maybe 6 minutes over. So I want to say thank you. And I hope this was a good use of your time. And Alexei, we can over to you.
Sure, thank you very much. No worries though. There were 6 interesting minutes, so I won't be mad as your host. No, no problem. So now, guys, we'll go to the Q&A sessions. So do not hesitate to turn on your camera and ask a question to Deepak. You can also put something in the chat or on YouTube or on Facebook if you're watching from there, and we'll get your question there to Deepak. And if there's no first questions, I have one for you. You said so. Well, there's one.
Okay. Hi, Deepak. Gaurav here. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So I've read also about the one of the concepts that you spoke about, the one-way doors and the two-way doors, and I was actually in a similar discussion with somebody on the same subject, and what we were thinking about is that are one-way doors actually a lot of thin slices of two-way doors, really? Because I know there's once you're through, there's no way back. But the way the reason why we actually started talking about this was when we are looking at a market entry. Of course, you can think about entering a market and then there's no turning back. But really, you also have a lot of touch points and a lot of two-way doors in that before you actually say, okay, let's go all in. So it's very coincidental that you brought this topic up, but it's exactly what I was talking with a few people some time back, that it's one-way doors are also because you can build, test, iterate within your one-way doors as well. And and create thin slices out of that and take it through. I don't know, what are your thoughts about some of that?
No, Gaurav, I agree to a great degree on what you said, and I think that's what I put out in the slide as well. That I think you could look at one-way doors as thinly sliced many two-way doors, right? Until you arrive at a point of no return, maybe, and that's why I think thin slicing approach is a good approach either ways, no matter which decision you're dealing with, but definitely crucial in the one-way door approach, because one-way door situations, because that then helps you cut the risks, right? And you kind of, as you're saying, build, test, iterate, and then it helps you. There are, however, certain scenarios where I think one-way, two-way door becomes more apparent, and like technical architecture comes to mind right now, right? So imagine that you're building a new product, or you're re-architecting in some cases. Sure. The choices you're making at that point of time are in some ways one-way door. And I think I want to stress that one-way doors are not necessarily, while theoretically they are made out to be something you can never come back from, but in reality, in real world, they're just very expensive doors to come back from.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And then you want to kind of minimize the risk of crossing over to a door from where basically you are broke on the other side and you have no money to come back. Right. And architectural calls kind of seem to my mind to fall in that category, where once you have made these huge investments in, and sometimes it becomes very hard to slice some of these architectural movements, right? And once you have made that, then the next movement is going to be equally expensive too.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and thank you for your comment. Okay, there's a question from Malik. Says, what do you do to de-risk the product bets informed by data brought by other people in the company? I see product decisions being made because of conclusions taken from looking at data that I wouldn't necessarily arrive to conclusions. I can speak. Okay, yeah. So if I can, just make sure I got your question correctly there, Malik. You're saying that, what do you do in situations where data has been presented to you by somebody else and they did the data analysis and conclusions have been arrived at, and now it's been thrust on you or you don't necessarily agree. I think one of the things I live by is that anytime somebody presents, so a data is only data if I think I have looked at it with my own two hands and eyes, not eyes, hands, right? So which means that I have somehow been able to slice and dice the data myself, right? And at least for me, and I will share my experiences here, when somebody else presents data to me, one, I ask, I practice the precision Q and again, try and ask questions, just calmly kind of absorb the data that's being presented, try and ask the questions, particularly how they relate to my product, how they relate to my customer, right? And if they're adequately answered, great, from within the data that's being shown me. If not, then I would also go back and do my own digging. And I have while I did say that build a lot of trust, I myself do have some trust issues when it comes to data in particular, and I like to see the data with my own two eyes, because the beauty and the problem with data is that it can be interpreted in many different ways, right? That being said, again, don't get overtly fixated by data as well, right? So as long as if you like the precision Q&A practice and your main concerns have been addressed and it's a two-way door, you could always run an experiment and you could kind of validate the next level hypothesis and kind of take it forward from there, right? So you don't have to you have to make sure the data is grounded on some facts and then it's been brought and presented in the right way. So ask those questions, but once you're sufficiently satisfied, you can probably take the bets. If you're not satisfied, then go dig your own data.
Thank you so much for taking your time to answer. Maybe let me add a bit more context into that. I think you already gave some input, but I think it's definitely very useful, especially when it comes to actually trying to test and validate whether those insights regarding the data will lead to results. But I guess the issue that I'm bringing and the problem where I'm coming from is when you're in a company where you have a certain dimension, where you have different product teams, and you have different clusters, and so the decision is not just yours to make, because maybe you're making a decision about search that is shared by like 4 or 5 different clusters, and other product managers might have basically, like you mentioned something in the presentation where it's not just about the data, it's about also knowing how to interpret that data. So what I'm trying to ask is, how do you navigate this social aspect of trying to navigate the decision making with other product managers that are also involved in the decision making?
Makes sense. Let me see if I can answer that question, right? And I don't claim to be an expert here, right? But I'll try to take a shot at it. Let's take the example that you brought up, which is search, right? And if I were looking at it, data is presented to say, we should do search like this or that, or, whatever else is being presented to you. If it's not very expensive, I would actually run an experiment and say, okay, right, I have asked the questions that I wanted. Maybe I am somewhat satisfied, or maybe there is, a certain amount of office dynamics at play here. Let me run an experiment, right? And I will again thinly slice it. Let's take the piece that validates the hypothesis, the code hypothesis that you're making in your data, and maybe let's run a test, right? And maybe let's run a test on 5% traffic. And because it's search, so I know you can kind of do that, right? And let's run a test on 5% traffic, or 2% traffic, or 10%, whatever is the valid sample size that you need to have. And let's see what that says. So I wouldn't, again, worry too hard if it's not a very expensive, super expensive effort to do. That could be one approach that you take, right? And then, as I say, right, like that may help you clarify. Does it answer your question in any way?
It kind of does, yeah. I mean, I think in a way it's kind of obvious, but in the way you put it, it made it clear for myself.
Sure. Happy to take it offline as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Deepak, thank you, Malik. I think we have time for one more small question, and then we'll cut it off, and we'll have some networking offline.
So I would love to hear more, maybe it's not a question, but an open question to the end, more about your personal product intuition. So how about that? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you use it on a daily basis? Maybe a few sentences about the magic.
Well, it's something I'm still developing. I would say I try to practice it in some cases. And let me see if I can pull an example to make it more concrete. I can actually talk about a time, but maybe I can't. I'm trying to kind of see how I can tell you what an intuition without something that can be publicly shared, right?
Yeah, sounds hard.
I mean, I can definitely talk about some experiences, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea to do that publicly, right? From my startup days experiences as well. But let's think hard a little bit more here. Yeah, I mean, maybe let's connect offline on this. But one of the things I'll tell you is, when we were exiting the company that I kind of, was involved with some friends of mine, I think we were at some point, we had a choice to make. Should we pick the fund or should we kind of exit? And that call was a bit of both data and intuition. I would say that. And we kind of decided, okay, where is the market headed? And what should we do next? And the event that we predicted will happen had not happened yet. But there were enough data pointers to kind of say that event will happen. And I'm sorry, I'm being abstract here a little bit. And we took a call to exit, and it kind of turned out to be a good call for us in the end. I can think of some small feature if that kind of works for you. And some of the features we're building now in Zalando, I mean, we of course back it up with data. But in some cases, because I just had the opportunity of talking to my partners and customers so much that this articles example that I kind of took, or the small product and KPIs example that I took was also at some level right, an intuition saying, I mean, this inherently looks something that's going to be super useful. One of the partners have told us that, and there is no way this cannot be more useful to more people, right? Just looking at the motivations of what people are trying to achieve, this is something that's going to be actually helpful. So we did the first really thin slice, put out the insight, and we got good response. And then we collected more data, and then backed it up with more insights, and then we kind of built a positive momentum from there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So you're practicing, and it's kind of good.
I would say that I'm practicing it, but I would also say this is something I'm learning as we go. And the reason I decided to put it up out here is because I have benefited from that somewhat. And I think this is something, and again, my intentions of putting out some of the topics here is not necessarily to present them as in, hey, I'm the expert and you should necessarily do that, but also to, lead you guys down to the path of discovery, right? Like read more about it. And there are alternate techniques that kind of exist, and maybe some of you can benefit from it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting question. I guess that's something that we all ask ourselves at some point, right? Like,
that was a very hard
to
question.
have this intuition.
So thank you for asking that.
It is a very one. Okay, everyone, I would suggest that we end it here for the streaming session and the Q&A. Of course, if you want to stay for the networking session, you can stay. If you are on YouTube or on any other platform, if you want to join us, the Zoom link is in the meetup, so don't hesitate to reach us. Just to quickly finish, well, thank you, Deepak, first of all. That was very interesting. Thank you for all the insight. And I think we had some very difficult questions tonight, which means that it was very interesting and very deep into the subject. So thank you guys also for the questions. Just to remind you that we will have a Christmas break, if I'm not wrong. Anna, let me check. I think it's this next week or maybe the week after. No, it's next week. So starting next week, we won't have events for, I think, 3 weeks until January. We have a Christmas break with that, but we'll be back in January. If you want more information, just have a look at the meetup page. Thank you everyone for this year of event that we've been having. We've been very happy to see regular faces, new faces all the time, and have like great speaker like Deepak today. So thank you very much. We can end up the streaming now, Anna, and we'll go to
And
more
we
like a chill
have a Christmas
networking
announcement,
session.
right, Alexi? Our small Christmas present for our friends.
Right, forgot about that.
No, I never forget about the present. So we do have our product people stickers, and if you would like, we would be happy to send them to you. We will post a link with the table, and please write your name and address, and that would be our small attention for all your friendship towards the year, and we're looking forward to the next year.
Thank you very much, Anna. Almost forgot that. All right. So yeah, thank you very much. I think we'll end it now for the streaming, and see you guys in a networking session.